السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, today it is Sunday, the 25th of Al-Muharram, 1442, and this matches the 13th of September 2020, and every Sunday we do Umdatul Ahkam. Today, باب أوقات النهي. باب أوقات النهي. The section or the chapter or of the times of forbiddance. The times of forbiddance here, the times when we are commanded not to pray voluntary prayer. الشيخ البسام رحمه الله, he says, حذرت الصلاة في أوقات معينة. Prayer is prohibited in specific times لحكم يعلمها الشارع, for a wisdom or wisdoms that the legislator knows. كالابتعاد عن مشابهة الكفار في وقت عبادتهم, like يعني from the wisdoms, like staying away from resembling the kuffar, the disbelievers, in the time of their worship. وأوقات النهي ثلاثة, and the times of forbiddance, the times when prayer is forbidden, are three times. الأول, the first, من صلاة الفجر حتى ترتفع الشمس عن الأرض قيد رمح. From the time Fajr is prayed up until the sun rises up from the earth, the span of a spear. The span of a spear. Yani the sun rises from the east, and then after it comes out, it rises up. So the person seeing it, he sees like the sun is up the length of a spear. الثاني, the second time of forbiddance, حين تبلغ الشمس نهايتها في الارتفاع حتى تبدأ في الزوال. Now the sun will rise up and continues to rise up. When the sun reaches its end in terms of rising up, it will reach the peak. It would reach the highest point. حتى تبدأ في الزوال. Then up until it starts moving towards the west, that is zawal, the time of zawal. Right? So the sun goes up and then it remains fixed for a few minutes. Those few minutes, the timing there, the prayer is prohibited. It remains fixed up. Then it moves. Once it moves, starts moving to the west, that's the time of Dhuhr. It's already in. Right? It becomes allowable. The third time of forbiddance, من صلاة العصر إلى الغروب, from Asr prayer, يعني from the time when you finish praying Asr, you prayed Asr. After Asr up until sunset. يعني when you pray Asr, right? When you pray Asr, before you pray Asr, you can pray voluntary prayer. Let's say Asr these days is like 4:55 or so. So maybe you prayed at 6 o'clock or 6:30. Up until you pray Asr, you can pray voluntary prayer. But then when you pray Salatul Asr, after that, you cannot pray voluntary prayers. And there are details. And we're saying forbiddance. Forbiddance, it could mean prohibition, haram, yani you're sinful if you do. And it could mean disliked, yani makruh, right? Makruh. So these are the three times where there is nahi. There is a command not to pray. الحديث الثاني والخمسون حديث 52 عن عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال, from Abdullah ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them both, he said, شهد عندي رجال مرضيون, men who are acceptable to me, they are men who are acceptable, they testified to me, وأرضاهم عندي عمر, the most acceptable to me is Umar. Yani there is a group who testified, and the best witness is Umar radiallahu anhu. The best of them, according to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, is Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. What did they testify to? أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن الصلاة بعد الصبح حتى تطلع الشمس, that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم forbade, نهى, commanded not to pray after subh, morning, يعني the morning prayer, up until the sun rises. وبعد العصر حتى تغرب, and after Asr, يعني he forbade that, praying after Asr, up until it sets, يعني up until the sun sets. This is in Bukhari, Hadith 581. It is in Muslim, Hadith 826. He said, وَمَا فِي مَعْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحَدِيثِ, and what has come in its meaning, the same, carrying the same meaning of the Hadith. Hadith 53. So the Sheikh put both of them because he's going to discuss yani, one time everything. This second hadith is similar. Hadith 53 عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه. Upon the authority of Abi Sa'id al-Khudri رضي الله عنه. Abu Sa'id is from the Ansar. He's a young man. His father is also a Sahabi رضي الله عنه. He was too young to even participate in the earlier battles. The first battle he participated in was Al-Khandaq, the trench, the battle of the trench. But he was from the knowledgeable Sahaba, and he narrated a lot of hadith from Rasulullah ﷺ, to a point that even the Khulafa, the caliphs, they narrated from Abi Sa'id radiyallahu anhu wa ardahu fil Jannah huwa wa walidihi radiyallahu anhum wa amman taradda anhum. May Allah be pleased with them, and may Allah please them, and may Allah be pleased with the one who invokes the pleasure of Allah upon all the companions radiyallahu anhum. So he narrated from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, قال, that he said, لا صلاة بعد الصبح حتى ترتفع الشمس. No prayer after subh, after morning. Yani we usually use fajr, dawn prayer, or subh, morning prayer, for the farida, salatul fajr. The sunnah of the fajr, sometimes we call it fajr too, the sunnah of fajr, right? طيب. But subh, morning prayer, is used for the fard. So no prayer after subh, after morning prayer, up until the sun rises up. ولا صلاة بعد العصر حتى تغيب الشمس. And no prayer after Asr prayer up until the sun sets. This is in Bukhari 586, Muslim 827. قال المصنف, the author, المقدسي, الإمام المقدسي رحمه الله, he said, وفي الباب, and in this chapter, in this subject, meaning in the same topic, right? Because usually they put the hadith pertaining to one subject or one theme or one topic, they put it in one place. They call it bab, like a chapter or a section. So the author, he said, وَفِي الْبَابِ, يعني regarding the same topic of this prohibition, the times of the prohibition of the prayers, voluntary prayers, that is, or the command not to pray. There are narrations from Ali ibn Abi Talib, also Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and Abi Huraira, سمراء بن جندب، سلمة بن الأكوع، and زيد بن ثابت، ومعاذ بن جبل، وكعب بن مرة، وأبي أمامة الباهلي، وعمرو بن عبسة السلمي، عمرو بن عبسة أو عبسة السلمي، وعائشة رضي الله عنهم، والصنابحي ولم يسمع من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فحديثه مرسل. So all of these companions رضي الله عنهم, there are narrations that came from them in this regard, same topic. And also the last one is as-Sunabihi. And this as-Sunabihi, he said, and he did not hear from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, so his hadith is mursal. Mursal is a man from the second generation of Muslims, Tabi'i, who says Rasulullah SAW said. This now is actually quoted from what Al-Imam At-Tirmidhi said. And those narrations here, they are in different books of hadith. Not all of them are agreed upon. Remember, Umdatul Ahkam is a hadith book that is taken from Bukhari and Muslim only. Those narrations here from the different Sahaba, not all of them are in Bukhari and Muslim. And they are in other books of hadith. Some of them are authentic. A good number of them are authentic, Hasan and the likes. And some of them are not authentic. Now, this last narration from As-Sunabihi, if he was a tabi'i, then there is a break in the chain. Yani the companion is not mentioned. And this is the position of Al-Imam At-Tirmidhi, and he took that from his Shaykh Al-Bukhari. Both of them believe that this man, As-Sunabihi here, is from the tabi'in, right? But there are scholars who have a different view. They say that there are two men, and one of them is actually a companion. He is the one who narrated this narration. Anyhow, that's that's how it is. There is a discussion on that. But anyhow, those ahadith, mashallah, they are suffice to establish the point. المعنى الإجمالي, the general meaning of these ahadith. في هذين الحديثين, in these two hadiths, النهي من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. There is forbiddance, there is the forbiddance, the command not to, from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the command not to pray عن الصلاة, not to pray بعد صلاة الصبح حتى تشرق الشمس وترتفع. That one should not pray after the morning prayer up until the sun shines, rises, and not only comes out, it comes out, تشرق, and it rises up, وترتفع في نظر العين, and rises up in the way you look with your eye, قدر طول رمح, the span of a spear, the amount of the span of a spear, a spear, right? رمح, rises up. So the Sheikh here, he says between brackets, أي ما يقرب من 3 أمتار, meaning what is close to 3 meters. You look at it in the beginning, as you know, if you are close to the beach, for instance, the sun, you see it rising up a little bit, the disk shows up, goes up a little bit. So in a way, you see it, it rises up. It's as if there is 3 meters between it and the ground. 3 meters. That's the span of a sphere. I'm mixing up between the sphere and the spear. MashaAllah. It's the span of a spear. Al-Rumh. Right? Al-Rumh. So the spear is about 3 meters high. ونهى أيضا عن الصلاة بعد صلاة العصر حتى تغيب الشمس. And he also commanded not to pray after Asr prayer up until the sun sets. لأن في الصلاة في هذين الوقتين تشبها بالمشركين. Because in praying, in the prayer, in these two timings, there is resemblance to the بالمشركين, resemblance to the polytheists. الذين يعبدونها عند طلوعها وغروبها. Those who worship the sun when when it rises and when it sets. وقد نهينا عن مشابهتهم في عباداتهم, and we have been commanded not to mimic them, not to imitate, not to resemble them, the mushrikeen, the polytheists, in their acts of worship. لأن من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. That is because the one who imitates, the one who resembles, the one who mimics a people, then he is one of them. Right? And there is a hadith with this wording. من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. The one who resembles a people, then he is like them. He is one of them. The one who imitates a people, then he is one of them. اختلاف العلماء, the difference between the scholars. اختلف العلماء في الصلاة في هذه الأوقات. The scholars differed regarding praying in these timings. فذهب جمهور العلماء إلى أنها مكروهة. The majority of the scholars, they are of the position, madhab, that it is disliked. It is disliked to pray in these timings. مستدلين بهذه الأحاديث الصحيحة وغيرها. Using as proof, مستدلين, with these authentic ahadith and other than them. وذهبت الظاهرية إلى إباحة الصلاة فيها. And the Zahiriya, this school of thought, Imam ibn Hazm and Dawood and Zahiri and those, they are of the position that it is allowed to pray in them. It is allowed to pray in these timings. وأجابوا عن أحاديث النهي بأنها منسوخة. يعني there are many ahadith. How did they took the position that it's allowed? They responded to these ahadith that these ahadith are actually mansukha, meaning abrogated, meaning cancelled. So there was that ruling and then the ruling was cancelled out. That's how they believe. وكل الأحاديث التي زعموها ناسخة جعلها العلماء من باب حمل المطلق على المقيد أو بناء الخاص على العام. Now there are ahadith that may sound like it is okay to pray in these timings. So they said all so what is the response of those who said no, it is not, you should not be praying? How did they respond to the Zahiri scholars who said, oh, it's allowed because these were abrogated? They said all the ahadith which they claimed that they are abrogating ahadith, the scholars made those ahadith from the aspect of having or understanding the unrestricted narrations based upon the restricted ones. Or they understood it, the majority of the scholars, they understood it from the aspect of basing that which is general with that which is specific. بناء الخاص على العام. Right? So you have a hadith that is unrestricted, says you can pray. And there are a hadith which say you should not be praying in these times. Right? So what did these scholars do? They said, we understand those ahadith that are unrestricted, we understand them in light of the restricted ones. Or a hadith is general, and there is a hadith in the topic that is specific. So we understand the general one in light of the specific one. This is what they did. So he said, وَلَا يُعْدَلُ إِلَى النَّسْخِ إِلَّا إِذَا تَعَذَّرَ الْجَمْعِ. We should not turn to abrogation. We should not understand from the hadith that it is abrogating hadith, except if we cannot, it is impossible to combine. And you cannot understand this hadith in light of the other hadith. If it is impossible to combine between both, then we say one of them is abrogating the other. But then if we can understand them both in a way that both we can take both and understand both, then we should not go for abrogation. We should use both ahadith and understand them in light of each other. وهو هنا ممكن بسهولة. He said here, to combine between those narrations, it is possible and it is actually easy. It is easily possible. It is possible with ease. ممكن بسهولة. It is possible with ease. ثم اختلفوا. More will come إن شاء الله. ثم اختلفوا. Then they also differed, the scholars. ما هي الصلاة المنهي عنها في هذه الأوقات? What is the prayer that we are commanded not to pray in these timings? فذهب الحنفية والمالكية والحنابلة إلى أنها جميع التطوعات. So the Hanafi scholars, the Maliki scholars, the Hanbali scholars, they are of the position that the salah that we should not pray, they are all the voluntary prayers. They should not be prayed in these timings, except with one exception. ما عدا ركعتي الطواف, except for the 2 units of prayer pertaining to at-tawaf. You know how when you do tawaf, circling the Kaaba, 7 rounds, then you pray 2 rakat after. So they said all salah you should not be praying, yani after Fajr, morning prayer, and after Asr, for instance, except the 2 rakat of tawaf. This you can pray anytime. مستدلين بعموم النهي الوارد في الأحاديث, using as a proof the general forbiddance, the general command not to pray that has come in the ahadith. Of course, the tawaf, there is one hadith that says, do not prevent anyone from praying the 2 rakat of tawaf anytime, day or night. So you can see this is one example of understanding the general and the specific. Do not pray after Asr, do not pray after Fajr, right? Do not pray after the morning prayer up until sunrise. Do not pray after our prayer up until sunset. This is general. Do not pray. But there is this hadith that is specific about tawaf. Do not prevent, it says, anyone from praying the 2 rakat of tawaf anytime, day or night. You see, this one is very specific. Very specific. So we say, like those, the Hanafis here, they said, all the hadith, or yani not Hanafi, Maliki, and the Shafi'i, the 3 of them, the 3 madhab, they said, you should not pray in these timings, except for the 2 rakat of tawaf. مستدلين بعموم النهي الوارد في الأحاديث, using the general forbiddance that has come in the ahadith. ومذهب الشافعية, as for the position of the Shafi'i scholars, ورواية عن الإمام أحمد, also one narration from Imam Ahmad. Imam Ahmad is narrated from him 2 positions. One position is like the other 2 madhabs, and one position agrees with the Shafi'iyya. And this position within the madhab of Imam Ahmad is actually اختارها شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية جماعة من أصحابنا. It is chosen by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and also a group of our companions. This is now Shaykh al-Bassam, he's saying, and also a group of our companions. Our companions here, he means the Hanbali scholars, because Shaykh Abdullah bin Abdul Rahman al-Bassam and also the scholars in general in Arabia, generally, mostly, that's what they learned. It's the Hanbali madhab. So Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh al-Fawzan, Sheikh al-Uthaymeen, may Allah have mercy on those who passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve those who are alive. They learned the Hanbali madhab. Also, all the Najdi scholars, Sheikh Imam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab and his descendants and students, that's the widespread madhab within them. There are other areas in Arabia that has the other madhabs or other people that have other madhabs. You have the Hanafis, you have the Shafi'is, you have the Malikis, but they are not the most common. Mostly is the Hanbali scholars. So this position of the Shafi'i, one position of attributed to Imam Ahmad, chosen by Ibn Taymiyyah and a group of Hanbali scholars. What is this position saying? It says that what is forbidden of the prayers, or يعني disliked, يعني the commanded not to pray, إلى أنها النوافل المطلقة عن الأسباب, that they are the voluntary prayers that are يعني does not have a reason, does not have a cause, right? That they are the prayers, the voluntary prayers that are not attached to a cause, that have no cause. مطلقة عن الأسباب. They are free. They are not having any of a cause behind it, right? أما الصلوات ذوات الأسباب, as for the voluntary prayers that have reasons why, that have causes for you to pray them, like what? He said كتحية المسجد لداخله, like uh, the two rakat of prayer that is called tahiyatul masjid, the greeting of the mosque, for the one who enters the mosque. وركعتي الوضوء, and like also the two rakat of wudu, the purification. فجائزة عند وجود سببها في أي وقت. Then they are allowed. Those voluntary prayers that have causes, they are allowed to be prayed at the time when their cause is present, in any time. In any time. So if you entered the masjid after Asr, just now you entered, you pray Tahiyat al-Masjid. Even if you prayed Asr already. Let's say you prayed Salatul Subh in the masjid, then you went out, did something, then came back to the masjid. Still, yani sunrise is not there. You entered the masjid. It is legislated for you to pray the two rakat Tahiyat al-Masjid. Why? Because you entered the masjid now. There is a cause. You prayed Asr in one masjid, then you went to another masjid for Maghrib. So you came in before Salat al-Maghrib, maybe half hour or so. You came in, you walked in, don't sit, pray two rakat first. Even if it is a time when it is disliked to pray, even if it is a time when it is disliked. What is the reason? Oh, this salah has a cause, has a reason behind it. Okay, you prayed Tahiyatul Masjid. Can I get up and pray two and two and two voluntary prayer? They say no, it is disliked. You should not pray. Why? Because this is open voluntary prayer. It does not have a cause or a reason that is linked and attached to it. Why did they say this? Because, for instance, you have the command when you enter the masjid, you pray two rakat. So you have this command not to pray after Asr, not to pray after Fajr. But now you walked into the masjid. We said that hadith is general. This hadith about praying Tahiyat al-Masjid is specific. We treat it in the same way like we treated the other three madhabs. They treated the two rakat of tawaf. They made an exception for them. Well, this one has an exception too. We have also the hadith of Bilal radiallahu anhu, when Rasulullah sallam asked him that, I hear the sound of your shoes in paradise, what are you doing? So he told him that I never made wudu, whether it was day or night, except after I made wudu, I would pray whatever Allah destines for me after that. So you make wudu anytime. You made wudu after Asr, maybe you prayed Asr, then later on, after 1 hour, you made wudu for you to go to the masjid. You made wudu, so you can pray two rak'at of wudu. As Bilal, he said, radiallahu anhu, that he prays two rak'at regardless, whenever he makes wudu, day or night. And Rasulullah sallallahu approved it. So once again, that hadith is saying, do not pray after Fajr, do not pray after Asr. That is general. This one is more specific. Talks about the sunnah of wudu, that you can pray two rak'at after or more after it. So this is how they understood it. طيب. وبهذا القول, he says, تجتمع الأدلة كلها. With this position, with this statement, يعني, that is held by these scholars, all the ahadith, all the proofs are put together. We put all the ahadith to use together, all of them. So if you don't have an excuse, you don't have a reason, do not pray. But if you have a reason to pray, then pray. If it's a salah that has a reason, then you can pray it. ويعمل بكل من أحاديث الجانبين. And in this way, it would be applied. The ahadith on both sides, the side that says do not pray and the side that says pray, you can apply both ahadith from both sides. ثم اختلفوا. Then they differed. هل يبدأ النهي في الصبح من طلوع الفجر الثاني أو صلاة الصبح? Does the forbiddance regarding the morning prayer, does the forbiddance for the prayer in Fajr, does it begin from the emergence of the second dawn or from Salat as-Subh, the morning prayer? So the second dawn, you have the first dawn and second dawn. The first dawn is the false dawn, and we discussed this a few weeks ago, right? The false dawn, false Fajr. This light that shows up vertically, and then it becomes dark after that, like maybe 20-25 minutes before the real dawn. You see a light that is vertical. Then it comes dark again. Whereas the true Fajr, which is the second dawn, is the dawn where the light spreads horizontally in the horizon. That is the time of the true Fajr. So, this command not to pray after Fajr, when does it begin? Does it begin when Fajr time comes in? Or actually after you pray Salatul Fajr? Right? Well, the hadith that we had here, it says after Fajr, right? After Subh. So here he says فذهب الحنفية إلى أنه يبدأ من طلوع الفجر وهو المشهور من مذهب الحنابلة. The position of the Hanafi scholars is that this forbiddance starts from the emergence of Fajr. When dawn comes in, the real dawn comes in, that's when it starts. You should not be praying. And this is the well-known or the famous position, widespread position within the Hanbali madhab. Yani, there is difference between the Hanbali scholars, but then this is the position that is widespread between them. مستدلين على ذلك بأحاديث, using أحاديث, a number of أحاديث. منها ما رواه أصحاب السنن الأربعة عن ابن عمر. Amongst these أحاديث, what is narrated by the four authors of the Sunan. The four authors of the Sunan. Abu Dawud, الترمذي, النسائي, ibn Majah. The four authors. عن ابن عمر, from Ibn Umar, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, لا صلاة بعد الفجر إلا سجدتين. There is no prayer after Fajr except two sajdat, two prostrations. Two prostrations meaning two rak'at, 2 units of prayer. يعني sometimes you say ركعتين, اركعوا مع الراكعين, اسجدوا سجدتين, meaning two units of prayer. Here, not two prostrations. There is no salah that has two prostrations only. It just means 2 units of prayer. طيب. Like we say ركعتين, rak'ah, bowing, but we mean one whole rak'ah, one whole unit. And rak'atayn, you pray rak'atayn, you don't just do 2 bows, you pray the whole 2 units. Likewise, sajdatain is used in the same way, meaning 2 units of prayer. So this hadith, it says, which is in the fourth sunan, No prayer after Fajr except for two units. فإنه يدل على تحريم النافلة بعد طلوع الفجر. For it proves that it is prohibited to or forbidden to pray voluntary prayer after the emergence of dawn, except for the 2 units of Fajr, ركعتي الفجر. The Sunnah prayer now. The Sunnah prayer. لأن المراد من النفي النهي. Because what is meant by this negation? No prayer. What is meant by no prayer? Meaning, do not pray. Meaning, command and nahi. Commanding you not to pray. The forbiddance of prayer. So it says no prayer. It's negating, but it actually is telling you not to do that. So this is the position of the Hanafis and most of the widespread position within the Hanbalis. Yani when dawn comes in, do not pray any voluntary prayer except for the 2 rak'at of Sunnatul Fajr. That's the only thing you pray. Then after that you pray the Fard. وذهب كثير من العلماء إلى أن النهي يبتدئ من صلاة الفجر. And many of the scholars, they are of the position, they opined, that this forbiddance starts actually after you pray the Fajr prayer, right? It begins from the Fajr prayer, not from the emergence of dawn. واستدلوا على ذلك بأحاديث, and they used as proofs for this أحاديث, a number of أحاديث. منها ما رواه البخاري عن أبي سعيد. Amongst them what Al-Bukhari narrated from Abu Sa'id, which is يعني our hadith here. لا صلاة بعد صلاة الفجر حتى تطلع الشمس. There is no prayer after the morning, the Fajr, the dawn prayer, up until the sun rises. Right? Like يعني this hadith that it's similar to the wording. This is in Bukhari 1197, Muslim 827 that we have here, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and Ahmad. Right? This hadith. So it says no prayer after Fajr prayer up until the sun rises. وبما رواه البخاري أيضا عن عمر بن الخطاب. Also, what Bukhari narrated from Umar ibn al-Khattab, that the Prophet ﷺ said, this is our hadith, لا صلاة بعد صلاة الصبح حتى تطلع الشمس. No prayer after the morning prayer up until the sun rises. وغير ذلك, that they use this, and other than this, وغير ذلك من الأحاديث الكثيرة الصحيحة, and other than that from the ahadith that are many that are authentic. وما استدل به الأولون فيه مقال, and what the previous ones, the first group of scholars, the Hanafis, and a widespread position within the Hanbalis, the Hanafis and the Hanbalis, what they used as a proof, in it there is something to say about it. فيه مقال. There is something to say about it, meaning that the narration is not that strong. وهو لا يقاوم مثل هذه الأحاديث. And this narration does not stand against, it cannot يعني beat, it cannot stand against those other ahadith. You know, they are in Bukhari and Muslim and like that, many ahadith. That is the position, it seems, of the Sheikh here. That is the position of the Sheikh. Now, this hadith that is in the 4 Sunan is actually authenticated by a number of ahadith, by a number of scholars, amongst them Sheikh Al-Albani. There is a difference in authenticating the hadith. But Sheikh Al-Albani authenticates the hadith. However, without this, actually the sunnah is not to pray except these 2 units. يعني the sunnah of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم. يعني Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he does not pray after dawn comes in. He does not pray any voluntary prayer except the 2 units of Fajr, Sunnah of Fajr. So this hadith actually here is supported by what Rasulullah ﷺ personally used to do. That is the Sunnah. Right? But those who de-authenticated the hadith, they say, some of them, they say it's allowed to pray. Although they would also say that the Sunnah is not to It's not established that you pray voluntary prayers in that time after dawn comes in, except for the 2 units of Fajr. طيب ما يؤخذ من الحديثين. What we take from these two أحاديث. Number one, النهي عن نوافل الصلاة المطلقة بعد صلاة الصبح. The command not to pray the open voluntary prayers. Open meaning unrestricted. The ones that don't have a cause, that don't have a reason. Not like Tahiyatul Masjid, not Tawaf, not the 2 rak'at of wudu. Al-Mutlaqa, openly, open voluntary prayers. We should not pray after the morning prayer up until the sun rises and up until the sun emerges and rises up that which is close to 3 meters high. 3 meters high. Usually we say it's about 15 to 20 minutes. Some said even 10 minutes, but about 3 meters above the ground. Number two, النهي عن نوافل الصلاة المطلقة بعد صلاة العصر حتى تغيب الشمس. The forbiddance of unrestricted open voluntary prayers after Asr prayer up until the sun sets. Up until the sun sets. Once again, I remind you, this is you prayed Asr. After you pray the Fard of Asr, do not pray until Maghrib. That's how it is. Not like if you still didn't pray Asr, you can still pray voluntary prayer. Say you want to pray 6 or 8 rak'at. You pray whatever you want to pray. Then after that, you pray Asr. After you pray Asr, you should not pray. But before it, it's okay. طيب. And there is more detail that will come. I'll mention it inshallah. Number 3, يؤخذ من حديث أبي سعيد لا صلاة بعد صلاة الفجر. We derive from the hadith of Abi Sa'id, no prayer after Fajr prayer. أن النفي هنا للجنس, that this negation here, no prayer, is negating the prayer يعني in general, جنس الصلاة. Right? وهذا مقتضى اللغة. This is what the language, the Arabic language necessitates. لكن but صيغة النفي إذا دخلت على الفعل في ألفاظ الشارع فالأولى حملها على نفي الفعل الشرعي. But this form, these wordings, صيغة, form or wording of negation, no prayer, right? This type of negation here, if it enters upon the verb الفعل in the language, in the words that are used by the legislator, of the negation of the legal action. That is because the generality of the prayer, جنس الصلاة, cannot be negated. فالشارع يطلق ألفاظه على عرفه وهو الشرعي. So the legislator, he will use his words for his own custom, his own customary usage of the words. And the customary usage of the words here in the language of the legislator, it is the legal meaning. What is he trying to say here? No salah after Fajr, no salah after Asr. It sounds like negating salah itself. But does it really negate the salah? Yani, if someone stood up and prayed 2, 4, 6, 8 voluntary prayer, he can pray, right? He can pray. So the negation here is for the legality of the prayer. So he prays, but that prayer is illegal, is not legislated by the legislator, right? طيب, that's what he means by these words. طيب. Number 4, فهم من بعض الأحاديث أن علة النهي هي خشية مشابهة الكفار. It is understood from some of the ahadith that the reason behind the forbiddance is the fear of resemblance to the disbelievers. فيؤخذ من هذا تحريم التشبه بهم وتقليدهم. So it is taken, it is derived from this that it is prohibited to imitate them and to mimic them in their acts of worship and their habits and their customs. So, why is it that the prayer is forbidden in those times? Oh, if you do, you resemble the disbelievers. So, in Islam, it is prohibited in general to resemble, to mimic, to imitate the disbelievers in their ways, right? Whether acts of worship, customs, or customary things, or even their habits. And it will come more inshallah. فائدة, he says a point of benefit here. المؤلف لم يتعرض للثالث من أوقات النهي مع ثبوته في الأحاديث. The author, he did not speak about, he did not mention, right, the third of the timings of forbiddance, although it is established in the ahadith. وهو وقت ضئيل قليل, and it is a time that is very small and very little. يبتدئ حين تنتهي الشمس بالارتفاع حتى تزول. This timing starts when the sun ends up rising up. يعني as I told you, this is just before the time of dhuhr. It goes up to the peak of its height, up until it starts moving towards the west. تزول. وقد ثبت تحريم الصلاة فيه بأحاديث, and it has been established the prohibition of voluntary prayer then in in ahadith, in a number of hadith from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. منها ما رواه مسلم. From them is what Muslim narrated from عقبة ibn عامر, from عقبة ibn عامر. ثلاث ساعات نهانا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن نصلي فيهن أو وأن نقبر فيهن موتانا. Three timings that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم forbade us that we pray within them or in them, or that we bury in them our dead. So there are three times Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, do not pray voluntary prayer in them, and do not even bury the dead in those timings. إحداها, one of them, حين يقوم قائم الظهيرة, when the timing of dhuhr is about to come. يعني when this timing, we said, when the sun goes up to the peak, it's about time for dhuhr, but not yet. And as I told you, this is just a few minutes. Even some of the scholars, they said about even 3 minutes. يعني the sun, when it starts rising, it rises up to the peak, right? And then, and in your shade in the morning is very big. Then it gets smaller, this shade, up until it remains fixed. It reaches a size, it remains fixed. It remains fixed, this shade of yours, or a shade of a pole, or whatever you put, a stick you put, it remains fixed for 3 or more minutes, right? So we usually estimate it 10 minutes. We say 10 minutes before the published time, of dhuhr. Let's say dhuhr, it says 1:25. So by 1:15 you should stop praying, right? 10 minutes before the timing of dhuhr. That is the time when the sun is يعني the peak. If you are in the equator, then you have no shade, zero shade. Then it starts. Once it starts, you have shade, then that's the time of dhuhr. Like ours here, you have a shade. You have a shade because we are at the north. So you have a shade, but that shade remains fixed for a few minutes. Then the shade starts growing up, growing bigger again. Once it moves, the time of dhuhr is in. That is the time of dhuhr. So within that time, when the shade is fixed, which is a few minutes, roughly up to 10 minutes, Allah knows best, that is the time when it is not allowed to pray voluntary prayer. Right? ومنها ما رواه مسلم أيضا عن عمرو بن عبسة. They read it عبسة or عبسة. الله أعلم it's عبسة more. Uh, but it is not definitely it is not عنبسة. It definitely is not عنبسة. It is عبسة. Right? No noon in between. This narration of Amr ibn Abasa رضي الله عنه, and in it ومنه, and from it, from that hadith, it's a long hadith, beautiful hadith. This is in Sahih Muslim, hadith number 832. Maybe you want to read that hadith. It's a beautiful hadith. It's a long hadith. That hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ said to him, ثم صلي حتى يستقل الظل بالرمح ثم أقصر عن الصلاة فإن حينئذ تسجر جهنم. He said, then pray. He's talking to him after sunrise now. The sun has risen and it is up, right? Where you can pray. He said to him, pray up until يستقل الظل بالرمح. This time which I told you, where the shade becomes fixed. The shade of a spear, for instance, the shade of a spear reaches its smallest and it remains fixed, doesn't move. That time, he says, ثم أقصر عنه. When it reaches that time, stop praying. Then, why he's explaining to him why it is you should stop. He said, for it is at that time فإنه حينئذ تسجر جهنم. It is at that time, Jahannam is being fed its fuel. So it's like يعني burning the most at that time. نعوذ بالله من جهنم. نعوذ بالله من جهنم. نعوذ بالله من جهنم. So this is every day. There is one exception, and that is on the day of Friday. The day of Friday, because it is established in the ahadith, once you walk into the masjid, you can pray as many as you want. You come early to the masjid, you pray as many prayers, as many rak'at as you want, up until the imam shows up. Even in that time, those few minutes, up to 10 minutes before Dhuhr. So if you came to the masjid and Salat al-Jum'ah is 1:30 or 1:45 and you came at 1, from 1 up until 1:30 or 1:45 you can pray. No exception on Friday. No exception on Friday. And there is a hadith that says with the exception of Friday, but that's a weak narration. But we have authentic narration that says you pray whatever Allah destines for you to pray. And this is what the Sahaba used to do, right? They will pray and pray and pray, right? Once they get in. So there is no dislike, no prohibition on Friday during that time before Dhuhr. طيب. Second benefit, فائدة ثانية. كثير من أحكام الشريعة بنيت على البعد عن مشابهة المشركين. Many of the legislated ruling or the rulings of the legislation, أحكام الشريعة, the rulings of the legislation, many of them are built upon or based upon بنيت على staying away, being far away, البعد, being far away from resembling the mushrikeen, the polytheists, from mimicking and looking like the mushrikeen. لأن في تقليدهم والتشبه بهم تأثيرا على النفس. That is because in imitating them and resembling them, in that there is an impact, تأثير, there is an impact on the soul, on the self. يتدرج ويمتد. This impact gradually grows and expands. Gradually grows and expands. حتى يصل إلى استحسان أعمالهم. To a point that it will reach to istihsan, viewing what they do, viewing their actions to be good. You start imitating them, slowly but surely you start liking and beautifying and viewing beautiful the actions of the disbelievers. واحتذائهم فيها. then you start يعني احتذاء. You follow them, right? You follow their footsteps, hmm, in those actions of theirs حتى يزول ما للمسلمين من عزة ووحدة واستقلال, to a point that it will lead to the vanishing of what the Muslims have of honor, of might, and unity, and being autonomous, being independent, right? Being يعني not dependent on the disbelievers. So this imitation grows bigger and bigger to a point that the Muslims are not united anymore. يعني Muslims are united in one way, one path, one look, right? That's how they should be. They are distinct from others. حتى يزول ما للمسلمين من عزة وحدة واستقلال ويصبحوا تبعا لهم. So they're not independent from the mushrikeen anymore, and they become just followers of them. تبعا لهم أو تبعا لهم. تبعا لهم, following them, or تبعا, followers of them, to them. قد ذابت شخصيتهم ومعنويتهم فيهم. Their personality and their morale has dissolved. يعني their spiritual self, their spiritual entity, معنويات, their spiritual entities or entity معنويتهم, and شخصيتهم, their personality, the Islamic personality, dissolves in them, in the personality and the spirits of the disbelievers. وبهذا يدالون على المسلمين, and in this way then the disbelievers, they will have the upper hand over the Muslims. They will overcome them. يدالون. والإسلام يريد من المسلمين العزة والوحدة في عبادتهم أو عباداتهم. Islam wants from Muslims to have might, عزة, and to have unity in their acts of worship, and وعاداتهم, even in their habits, وتقاليدهم, even in their customs. They should be having might, they should be united in their acts of worship, in their habits, and in their customs, and in their conditions in general, وأحوالهم, in their conditions. ويريد منهم أن يكونوا أمة مستقلة. Islam wants from the Muslims to be a nation that is completely free and independent, having independence, استقلال, مستقلة. لها صفتها الخاصة, a nation that has its special description, وميزتها المعروفة, and it has its distinct well-known quality. ومع الأسف الشديد, the Sheikh says, يعني very sorry and very regrettably, نجد المسلمين في عصرنا يجرون خلفهم بلا روية ولا بصيرة. We find the Muslims يعني in our time, in our era, عصر, in our time, they run behind them, they run after the disbelievers without even thinking, بلا روية, and without insight. They are after them, doing what they do. وكل ما ورد عن الغرب من الغرب فهو الحسن. Everything that comes from the West, that is what is beautiful, that is what is good. وكل عمل يأتون فهو الجميل. Every action that they do, they come up with, that is the beautiful, that is the nice action. ولو خالف الدين والخلق. Even if this action opposes the religion and the character, the moral, خلق, the good morals. فإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We surely belong to Allah, and to Him we will return. It's a musibah, it's a calamity for the Muslims to be like that. اللهم أيقظ المسلمين من رقدتهم. Oh Allah, the Shaykh makes dua, and you say Ameen inshallah. Oh Allah, wake up the Muslims from their sleep. ونبههم من غفلتهم, and alert them from their heedlessness. واجمع على الحق والهدى كلمتهم. And oh Allah, gather together upon truth and guidance their word. Make their word upon guidance and truth. إنك سميع مجيب. You are all hearing, all responsive. وليس المراد, the Sheikh now is highlighting something. ليس المراد أن لا نتعلم ما علموه من صناعة واختراع. It is not intended here that we should not learn what they learned of صناعة واختراع, of يعني inventions, اختراع, and صناعة, making, and يعني having things made, يعني having factories to make things, you know. We should learn that. He said فهذه علوم مشاعة لكل أحد. These are branches of knowledge, these are sciences that are commonly, that should be commonly available. مشاعة. Everybody shares the right to learning those sciences. Everyone, right? ونحن أولى بها منهم. He says, and we Muslims, we have more right to those sciences than them. Why? He explains. لأننا, that is, because we حين نتعلمها, because when we learn them, right? When we learn those as Muslims, how to make weapons, how to make cars, how to make, you know, whatever kinds of things, نستعملها فيما يأمر به ديننا من استتباب الأمن والسلام وإسعاد البشرية. When we learn those things, those sciences, we will use them in that which our religion commands us to use them for, of amn, safety, security, and salam, and peace. وإسعاد البشرية, we will use it to make humanity happy. Islam, Muslim nation, will make the humanity happy if they use this. أما كونها بأيدي طغاة مستعمرين. As for these sciences to be in the hands of tyrants, in the hands of colonizers, مستعمرين, colonizer, we should say مستخربين. The word استعمار, right? It is originally, it means to maintain and to grow and develop. And much of this colonization that happened is actually istikhrab, is actually ruining and corrupting things. And يعني suffice us to mention, يعني for instance, like what France has done to the African nations. يعني gold. Is there gold in France? Is there gold in France? There is no gold mines in France. But France has one of the highest يعني in terms of the amounts of gold. Where did they get that from? Where did they get it from? It's from the African nations. Look at Africa, Mali. How much gold does it have? It's like almost nothing compared to what France has. Where did they get it from? Just يعني a few months back, the يعني subhanallah, the skulls of the Algerian fighters who fought defending their country from the French colonization, right? They took their skulls with them in France, and they were like kept for many years, and now they are sent back for them to be buried, and they received them in Algeria and they buried them and all of that, right? So this is how يعني unfortunately people use non-Muslims use the force in a way that is not, you know, يعني if Muslims, if it was the opposite, Muslims, if they're of course true Muslims, yeah, fake Muslims and deviant and disobedient Muslims will do things that are horrible, especially the hypocrites, especially the ones that are non-Muslims, but they are in the cloak of Muslims. They are in the cloak of Muslims, but they, those like some of the so-called Muslim leaders, They tell Europe, oh, we are afraid for you of those terrorists in the masajid. You are the Muslim who's telling the Europeans that. Subhanallah al-Azim. Are you a Muslim or what? Yani if it comes from a non-Muslim, is understood, but it comes from a Muslim. And in this generality, yeah, there are deviant Muslims. There are deviant Muslims. But then talking about the masajid, we are afraid for you from those masajid. And classifying some human rights, Muslim human rights organization, like CARE, for instance, CARE USA, a Muslim country categorizes CARE as a terrorist organization. American organization and terrorist? Who says that? Those are the people who claim to have Islam, but they, يعني, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Those kinds of people, they will do much harm. But the true Muslims, they will never do like what France has done. Keep the skulls what as souvenirs or something. They will not do that. Not the true Muslims. They do not use power to destroy and to for mass destruction والعياذ بالله, right? This is what يعني happened and keeps happening again and again. So for these sciences to be in the hands of the real Muslims, they will use it in things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to really put it in the right place and not to transgress also, not to transgress with it, right? So as he said, if the sciences, those sciences remain only in the hands of those tyrants, disbelieving tyrants and colonizers, فستكون أداة تخريب ودمار للعالم. It will be a tool that is used to ruin and corrupt and to destroy the universe. And this is what we see actually. This is what we see happening. They have the force because they have those sciences. And we did speak last week about the Islamic civilization and what it has offered to humanity, right? When the Muslims were strong, they were not like oppressive. Even the oppressive Muslims, they didn't they cannot reach a speck. They cannot reach even a little bit of what the corruption and the killing and the mass destruction that many of the so-called westernized, liberal, those different titles that they give, they haven't done anywhere like or anything like what enough what happened to the Africans that were brought forcibly as slaves to the United States, and what is happening to the Muslims and the non-Muslims who are just black. That's their only disadvantage. Their color is too dark for America. That's their sin, right? That's what's happening. And you know what happened to the black American George Floyd, and this knee type of stepping with the knee on their neck. And you have seen, I'm sure, the number of Palestinian kids and older men with the same knee on their neck in Palestine, right? That's what is happening. That's what they are going to do. Whereas in Islam and Muslims, even with Muslims having racism in them, Muslims are not infallible. They're not angels. Muslims are humans too, but it never reaches this level of يعني racism and يعني the pumping up of the lineage and the pumping of the color يعني it doesn't reach as bad. They might even act in a racist way, but not like this, not to this point, not to this level, not to this level that many of يعني the humans, these are human beings, many of the humans have suffered. Why? Just because of disbelief and its people and the beliefs and the creed of the disbelief. والعياذ بالله. So that's that this time. Before I go, I will have to mention something, and that is regarding the command not to pray after Asr, not to pray after Asr up until sunset. We have an authentic hadith in the Sunnah of Abi Dawood and others that Rasulullah SAW said that with a restriction here, that as long as the sun is up and clear, then it is still okay to pray. It is still okay to pray. When does it become disliked, this command after Asr? It is when the sun starts getting yellowish up until it sets. Up until it sets. So let's say يعني today Asr is 4:53 for something like that. So if you prayed Asr at 5:15, 5:15, يعني the sun will not turn to be yellow up until maybe 6:30, 6:45. So that time you can still pray. And Rasulullah SAW actually did pray. Rasulullah SAW did pray. One time he missed the sunnah that he prays after Dhuhr. He got busy. He prays 2 rak'at after Dhuhr. He got busy. He prayed Asr, then he prayed 2 rak'at after Asr, replacing the 2 rak'at after Dhuhr. And usually Rasulullah SAW, after he starts praying something, he keeps it. So he kept praying 2 rak'at after Asr. He kept praying 2 rak'at after Asr. This is as long as the sun is up and clear. بيضاء نقية, white and clear, pure, not yellowish, not mixed with yellowish color. So as long as it is up and clear, you can still pray at that time. The dislike starts when the sun turns to be يعني it gets yellowish up until sunset. Now, also I should say that the three times sunrise, sunset, and the middle, just 10 minutes before Dhuhr. Those are the three most disliked. Most disliked, right? Most disliked, especially sunrise and sunset. And we have a hadith that says that at that time, the when it rises and when it sets, right? At that time, Rasulullah ﷺ said something that is from the matters of the ghaib, the hidden unseen world to us, and that is that it rises or it sets within the two horns of shaitan, of the shaitan. And at that time, the mushrikeen, the polytheists, prostrate to it. So these are times are very disliked times. So for instance, why am I saying this? For instance, you come to Salatul Maghrib. Today, Maghrib is like 7:33 or 7:32, something like that. So if you came at 7:30, right, or 7:31, you get to the masjid, you walk in, do not pray then. Do not pray. What do? Remain standing. Because it's only 50 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute and a half. Wait it out up until the sun sets. Then they call the adhan. Now you can pray the 2 rak'at between adhan and iqama, and then this way you pray Tahiyatul Masjid too, right? Why? Because it's very, very disliked, close to prohibition at sunrise and at sunset. You should not pray at that time. So if it is a minute, wait it out. Do not pray. To stay away from that timing because it's very disliked. Other than that, as was mentioned, after you pray Salatul Fajr, the Fard, do not pray up until the sun rises up 3 meters. Now, if you came, you prayed Salatul Fajr, the Fard, but you missed the Sunnah of Fajr, what do? You can pray it right after Fajr. This is one of the exceptions too. This is one of the exceptions. Why? Because Rasulullah ﷺ saw a man praying after Fajr. And he questioned him about that. He said, this is the Sunnah of Fajr. He missed it. So Rasulullah ﷺ approved it, which gives you another exception. Right? Pray the Sunnah of Fajr right after Fajr. If you chose to wait up until sunrise and you pray it after sunrise and you wait until duha time comes, 10 minutes or 15 minutes after sunrise, you pray the Sunnah of Fajr and you pray 2 rak'at of duha. That will be good. And there is a hadith that it is better to wait up until sunrise. But then, if you prayed it right after, that is okay, and it is this not this no dislike. It is okay to pray at that time. So, in general, if you pray when dawn comes in, do not pray anything except the 2 rak'at of Sunnatul Fajr. I've seen people go to the masjid, they pray Sunnatul Fajr, then they pray 2 rak'at, then they pray 2 rak'at. Do not pray that. The least, it is not Sunnah to pray more than the 2 rak'at of Fajr. The least I can say. The least I can say, it is not, you're not supposed to, it's not Sunnah to pray more than the 2 units of Sunnatul Fajr. Then you pray the Fard. Then after that, you do not pray up until 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes even after sunrise. Then you can pray up until 10 minutes before the time of Dhuhr. So if the published timetable says 1:20, at 1:10 stop praying, just to be on the safer side. Otherwise, it's actually less than 10 minutes, maybe 3-5 minutes, something like that. But to be on the safer side, about 10 minutes before the published time of Dhuhr, do not pray. Then after Dhuhr time, you can pray up until Asr comes, is still okay. Even if you still didn't pray Asr, you can pray whatever you want, even after the time of Asr comes in. Pray whatever you want of voluntary prayers. If you pray the Asr, then after that, if the sun is up and clear, you can still pray up until it becomes gonna turn yellowish, which is like, let's say 45 minutes, 1 hour before sunset. Then to be on the safer side too, stop praying. Then stop praying. Then up until sunset. Up until sunset. Then after sunset, the time is open until Fajr again, up until dawn. The exception from the disliked timings is made for Salah that has a reason. Salah that has a reason. Like when you came for Fajr prayer, but you missed the Sunnah, you can pray it right after. Like if you walked into the masjid after Asr or after Fajr, you can still pray the Sunnah or Sunnatul Wudu, right? You can pray Sunnatul Wudu. Sunnatul Tawaf, you can pray the Tawaf, the 2 rak'at of Tawaf, right? They differ if it's a wajib or a Sunnah, but anyhow, the Sunnah, the 2 rak'at of Tawaf, you can pray that also anytime during day or night. However, as I said, best to avoid the exact time of sunrise and the exact time of sunset. Do not pray on that, because at that time, as I said, the shaitan, it seems, يعني he wants to be worshipped or wants to look like as if he is worshipped, Allah knows best يعني. But sun rises and sets between the two horns of a shaitan. And at that time, the mushrikeen prostrate to it. So avoid doing that at that time. So as I said, if you came 10 minutes before sunset, pray quickly and sit. But if you came just 1 minute or 2 minutes just at the sunset, do not pray at that time. Wait a little bit, standing up until you you up until the sun sets, right? And Allah knows best. Also, as I told you, the day of Jumu'ah, there is an exception for the middle of the day, the 10 minutes before the time of Dhuhr. Not on the day of Jumu'ah, it is okay to pray at that time. Jazakumullahu khairan. I took long today. I'm sorry. 1 hour and 21 minutes. Subhanallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.